When the term serial killer is used, it is normally accepted that the victims referred to are people. But a serial killer of animals stalked the benighted parks of Adelaide in the period at the close of and just after World War I, with a pathological obsession for horses, which terrified and outraged the community. Horses continued to be an integral part of daily life in Adelaide until well into the 1950s. A commentator in 1928 remarked that one saw horse-drawn lorries everywhere on Port Road, although businesses were gradually shifting to motorised transport. Cars at the time of the horse slayer were still such a novelty that each registration was published in the newspapers. The Mail of the 27th of November 1920 lists registrations 8,325 to 8,357 of cars and lorries, listing the person registering the vehicle, the suburb they lived in, and the make of car. Fords and Chevrolets were most common, but a Swift, a Humberette, a Hupmobile, a Chalmers and a Talbot were also on the list. Motorcycles were more common, with 17,818 registered, including 2 Abingdon King Dicks. Bicycles were preferred by many more. The horror is thought to have begun early in 1918. Mr. F.S. Coombe of Sturt Street, Adelaide, put his bay mare of 14 hands out to graze in the South Parklands. He saw his horse on Friday the 24th of May, and she was fine and healthy. Returning on Sunday, he found a shocking sight. The horse had been attacked with what was thought to have been some type of instrument, possibly the blunt side of an axe. But when he first saw her, the owner thought someone had shot her in the forehead, just above the eyes. The injuries were so severe that every bone in her face was broken, and her brains exposed by the vicious assault. A local had seen the distressed horse and had summoned help from the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Inspector Batten and a veterinary surgeon named Wells came and, having examined the horse, concurred that she was in such pain nothing could be done to help, and the inspector shot the mare to end her suffering. Investigation by the police revealed that somebody had tied the mare to a post, found stained with blood, probably using a length of wire, and then battered the helpless animal. The horse had either been freed or managed eventually to escape, and roamed the park until found, an estimated 52 hours later. Coombe reported that this was the second horse of his which had been attacked in a similar manner in the same park. The first time had been about 3 months prior, and Mr. Larkin had had his horse killed there before that. It was recalled at the SPCA that a youth had complained that somebody had shot his horse in the head, seemingly for no reason, in 1917, but that event was never definitively tied to the horse slayer case. In June, another horse was found in the South Parklands, with one of its eyes knocked from its socket. The eye needed to be removed, but whether it was an attack or an accident was never certain. July of 1918 appears to have been quiet, but in August the newspapers warned that a maniac was abroad in the parklands. The writer was mystified that somebody would harm the animals for no logical reason, such as to take the hide or hair. Unless it had been done to spite the owners for some personal reason, it was concluded the attacker was a lunatic. On Friday the 9th of August, a gelding was found dying in the South Parklands east of Unley Road, with a wound in the centre of its forehead and its skull fractured. The pony was euthanised. Although it was suggested that the animal may have injured itself accidentally, the same weekend another horse was slain. On Monday, the 12th of August, a pony which had been grazing with other horses in the West Parklands was found dead near the Bay Road, since renamed Anzac Highway. The pony had been alive on Sunday evening and was found with a small puncture wound in the forehead and its throat cut. The SPCA urged anyone who saw injured animals to report them immediately so they could receive veterinary care as soon as possible. A week later, on the 19th of August, a pony mare was wounded behind the West Terrace Cemetery, and on the 31st of August another horse was killed with a blunt instrument in the West Parklands. Neither event appears to have been reported in newspapers at the time, which makes the apparent lull in attacks until May 1919 questionable. If a lull occurred, whether due to increased vigilance by owners and police, or for some other reason, it allowed owners of horses to breathe easily. Other attacks and attempted attacks might have occurred. They were not mentioned and quickly forgotten. The next attack was not reported at first either, but as it was the first of a series of 3 killings in 2 weeks, it was mentioned soon after. On the 13th of May 1919, a horse belonging to Mr. Tonkin was found in the West Park lands with its throat cut. On Saturday the 24th of May, a Mr. Herrick left his draft horse, a bay gelding, to graze near the Bay Road in the southwestern parklands, near the cemetery. The next day it was found dead with its throat cut. A 12-inch cut extended from the left ear to the centre of the windpipe. The windpipe itself was not cut, but the horse had bled to death from its jugular vein being severed. The next victim was killed on Monday night or early Tuesday morning, 27th of May. Another light bay draft horse, valued at £16, not far from where the previous 2 slayings had occurred, in parklands between Bay Road and Goodwood Road. It was found by SPCA Inspector Batten while he was patrolling in hopes of apprehending the villain. The City of Adelaide posted a reward of £10 for information on the culprit. Soon after the attack on Tuesday morning, police questioned a 26-year-old man named Francis Marker and arrested him in Victoria Square. Constable Damon had known Marker for a number of years and asked him where he had been the night before. Marker said he had left his home in Jepp's Cross at 7 p.m. When asked where he had slept, he replied, "With friends at home." Then he said he left home with another man at 1 a.m. He said he was fond of horses and knew nothing about the attacks on them. Police searched Marker and found 2 pocket knives and a razor which appeared blood-stained. When asked about the blood, Marker replied that he would not hurt anything. In court the next day, Marker's father stated that his son was weak-minded and he could not tell time and imagined things. He was harmless, he said. Possibly because Marker had been convicted of sexually assaulting a 5-year-old girl 3 years before, he was found to be insane and sent to Parkside Mental Hospital. The girl had been interfered with by his stepbrother, but he had been with him at the time. Had the horse slaying ceased at that point, Francis Marker would have been assumed to be the person responsible. But they did not. Only days later, on the 3rd of June 1919, another horse was found in the morning, this one too in a paddock at the rear of West Terrace Cemetery. The mare, who had worked in the cemetery, had her throat cut. A piece of blood-stained paper and human footmarks were discovered near the body. The Daily Herald newspaper, in reporting the crime, asked rhetorically in the headline, "Where are the police?" In fairness to them, the parklands are 2,252 acres in extent. At least 300 horses could be found grazing in the South Parklands alone. The spree continued on the 10th of June. 3 draft horses belonging to the SA Brewing Company were depastured near the observatory on West Terrace. Overnight the maniac attempted to kill all 3. One horse was found dead with the signature throat cut, while the other 2 survived, but both had a small vertical cut on their necks. The horse which died had a deep gash made by a razor-sharp implement, and it was thought would have died of blood loss within minutes of the cut being made. It was a while before another confirmed attack was made. Maybe the horses survived by kicking at or biting the assailant, which curbed his bloodlust temporarily. It was noteworthy that there seemed to be no sign of a struggle at any of the scenes. Maybe he just let it build up for the spring rampage, which he unleashed. The slaughter began again on the night of the 26th-27th July. The Daily Herald reported 2 horses were killed about a mile apart on the same night and in the same manner, one in the South Parklands and the other in the West Parklands. Both horses were stabbed on the left side of the neck and were found laying on their right sides. It was not explicitly stated what damage was done, but for the first time, one of the corpses was interfered with after death. The SPCA conducted an experiment on the carcass of a horse which had been shot. They found that an ordinary straight razor was capable of inflicting the wounds displayed, being even more effective than a sharp butcher's knife. The paper commented that if somebody could kill big, strong animals in open parks close to the city, time and again, and evade detection in each instance, then what was to prevent somebody from doing so to people? They urged a special effort be put in to unmask the elusive slasher. A member of the state parliament asked that a substantial reward be offered to end the series of ruthless killings, which the Premier promised to raise with his cabinet. Meanwhile, the city of Adelaide had increased their reward to 50 guineas, with the SPCA offering a further £27. Although the horse slayer was suspected to be a man, 2 women were reported in the vicinity of one of the latest outrages. The Daily Herald also questioned why an Aboriginal tracker was not employed to follow any footprints in the area of the killings. They pointed out that the police had a very efficient tracker named Ryan a few months earlier, who was practically responsible for the capture of many notorious criminals. The government, however, refused to pay a fair remuneration for Ryan's work, so he quit. For the first time, the slayings were termed murder by the press, explaining that as Australians generally believed in the ideal of a fair deal, it extended to animals. The Herald going so far as to name the lunatic Jack the Slitter. On August the 17th, the slasher was busy in the East Parklands for the first time. 3 horses were attacked, but although they all lost a lot of blood, it was believed they would survive. The first was a bay gelding with a 16-inch gash on its neck from the mane down. The second, a brown pony named Joker, found near the Britannia Hotel, again with a cut throat. And the third, a black draft horse with a cut 9 inches long and 2 inches deep on its neck. The same instrument was believed used in all 3 incidents. All 3 equines had their wounds stitched by vets. Joker was a particularly quiet and domesticated pony, a pet of the Best family, reared by Thomas Best. He suffered an 18-inch vertical cut down his neck. The government and city reward now totalled 100 guineas. The community was appalled by the diabolical crimes, and theories began to circulate on the identity of the killer. Some thought it might be a crazy woman. Others thought it was a devotee of some cult sacrificing the horses to some arcane deity. With outrage building and a substantial reward to be gained, large numbers of people began prowling the parklands, hoping to catch the miscreant in the act. Police spent more of their time stopping and checking the credentials of these people every day. The crimes were particularly affecting the homeless who slept in the park. With police patrolling more, they were finding themselves roused and questioned, and one old dosser said that life wasn't worth living now. One of the homeless, a man of German extraction, found with a big knife, was suspected of being the slayer, but the attacks continued after he was jailed for vagrancy. On September the 2nd, 1919, the maiming took place outside the parklands for the first time. The military headquarters was located at Keswick Barracks on the Bay Road, just the other side of the parklands. A horse was slashed on its neck, but survived. Another new location for the slaughter was chosen on September 6th, this time in the North Parklands. Mr. Hurst's horse had its throat slashed and was found dead just north of the Caledonian Hotel. An Aboriginal tracker was brought in, but a crowd of sightseers had obliterated any possible tracks for him to follow. September the 10th saw yet another horse killed in the parklands, this time near a rubbish destructor near Port Road. The horse, valued at £40, was found entangled in a wire fence, which it had evidently run into after it had been slashed on the left side of its neck, a cut 9 inches long and 1.5 inches deep. On the 30th of September, the first slaying outside of the parklands or its close vicinity was of an old gelding killed in the usual manner in a paddock at Richmond Crossing, where the former Glenelg train line crossed South Road, even though it was still only about 1 kilometre from the site of earlier crimes. While the horse slayer was transferring his infernal activity to the suburbs, police were still watching the parklands. On the night of the 1st of October, a man named Frederick Brewer, an unmarried man aged 48, was arrested in the North Parklands on suspicion that he was there to maim horses. Constable Ward had been at the foot of Montefiore Hill at 9:15 p.m, when he noticed a man standing on a bench next to a horse he was holding with a rope. When the man saw the policeman, he jumped down from the bench. On being questioned if the horse was his, the man said it was not. When asked what he was doing, he said nothing and tried walking away. Constable Ward sternly rebuked him, saying he was a police officer and wanted to talk to him. Brewer then said the horse had come up to him, and he thought he'd hide behind it in an attempt to catch the horse maimer. After Brewer was arrested, a razor was found 27 feet from the bench and some rope 80 feet away, although Ward had not been seen throwing anything away. Brewer acknowledged the rope was his, but the razor was not. On the 9th of October, Brewer faced a magistrate's court and explained that he'd been going to the parklands 2 or 3 nights a week to find the horse slayer. During the trial, it was revealed that the footmarks left behind by the perpetrator were boot size 7. Brewer's shoe size was apparently not size 7, as the charges were dismissed as lacking any evidence. Brewer was acting oddly, and may have been in the park to commit a different type of crime. Another killing had taken place after Brewer's arrest, but while Brewer was on bail. Mr. J. Byrne of Lipset Terrace, Brooklyn Park, saw his 3-year-old bay filly safe and well with other horses in a paddock near his home at 5 p.m. on the 5th of October. On the morning of the 7th of October, the horse was found dead, its throat cut. An aged chestnut gelding was placed in a paddock at Penryn, between Marion Road and Military Road, and very close to Brooklyn Park. The area is now where the Adelaide Airport and West Richmond are situated. The horse was left to graze at 11:30 a.m. on the 13th of November 1919. The next day at 11 a.m. the horse was found dead, with an extensive gash in its neck, and disemboweled. By one of the strange quirks that coincidence plays, the case was investigated by Detective Horseman. With this crime, the bloody spring of 1919 came to a close. The location of the crimes suggests that the slayer may have lived in the Richmond area at the time. The crimes recommenced on the night of the 5th-6th January 1920. Strangely, this time they took place in the Adelaide foothills at Stonyfell. A horse valued at £50 and a pony valued at £12 were noticed wandering around a paddock bleeding profusely. Their necks were found gashed, and a veterinarian was summoned to stitch their wounds. Both animals survived. 2 days later at Paynham, another horse was maimed. This one was in an open stable when attacked. Glenelg was the next scene of carnage on the 23rd of January. The horse slayer targeted a chestnut gelding belonging to Miss Sanderson, which was killed in its paddock within a few feet of the Bay Road. Pools of blood show how the stricken animal wandered about after its throat was cut, the gash running toward the shoulder. The attack alarmed owners of racehorses, many of which were stabled in the area, the Morphettville racecourse being adjacent. Another bay gelding was killed with a slit throat near the observatory in the West Parklands on February 27th, 1920. This time, finally, the slayer may have been seen. At 12:30 a.m, Chief Petty Officer McPherson of HMAS Australia was walking through the parklands to Mile End Railway Station when he noticed a tall man trying to catch a horse. It was too dark to see any features, except that the man had a moustache. The description, vague though it was published in the newspapers, but failed to provide any leads to the culprit. The horse slayer did avoid the parklands for the next 6 months, however. The next victim was a pony owned by a dairyman named Neil of Marion Road, North Richmond. The animal was grazing near Mr. Neil's property and was attacked overnight, 11th-12th March, having its throat wounded, but survived. The slayer's luck almost ran out on the night of the 16th of April, 1920. A Keswick resident heard a commotion at the new showgrounds in adjacent Wayville at about 10 p.m. He saw a man among some horses depastured on the grounds, who ran off when he realised he had been seen. On checking, one of the horses was found to have a cut in its neck, which it survived. The Advertiser newspaper received a pen-written letter dated 3rd of May 1920, which purported to be from the killer. In it he stated that he had gashed 200 horses and was about to start slashing racehorses, a stable at a time. Although it was considered the letter was from a crank, it was remarked upon so that the racing stables could be alert, just in case the letter was authentic. On the 8th of May, at midnight, Mr. J. Osborne of Young Street, Burnside, heard a noise in his stable but disregarded it. In the morning his horse ran from the stable when the door was opened, into a paddock. It was found to have a long gash which had just missed its windpipe, which had been made with a sharp instrument. Oddly, there was no blood found in the stable, suggesting the horse may have been taken outside and returned. The horse killer again was absent during the middle of winter, perhaps too close calls at being caught in his butchery having made him cautious, only to reappear in the North Parklands where the next horse was killed on the 21st of August. Once more the unfortunate animal was a bay gelding, with a 15-inch wound to the throat, which was found dead. The pattern was interrupted in September 1920, when the victim was not a horse, but a short-horned Jersey heifer. The beast was in a pasture with other cattle and some horses at Camden, near Glenelg. On the morning of the 16th, it was noticed it had a 7-inch cut in its throat down to the windpipe. Harold Alderson from the Forestville Horse Hospital stitched the wound, and the heifer survived. A possible attack was made at Mile End on the 29th of September. Percy Geyer of Fisher Terrace was out driving his horse when he noticed it was bleeding. On checking under its mane, he found a 4-inch slash, which he believed had been inflicted the previous night, while the horse was stabled. At 6:50 a.m. on the 5th of November, a driver named Jones informed a constable that there was a horse dead in Parkland on the western side of the Morford Street Bridge, laying on the ground, with its head almost severed. The horse was owned by a cabman who lived in Adelaide. On the 2nd of December 1920, a baker's horse was found dead in the old tram paddock opposite the Mitcham police station. Bloodstains showed the animal had been attacked near some bushes and walked about 150 yards to the spot where it died. Again, for reasons known only to the slayer, the crimes ceased for the entirety of 1921. By June of 1921, despite the lack of fresh attacks, the case was very much in the minds of the citizens of Adelaide. It was said that numerous young women working in shops had received notes from someone calling themselves the Horse Maimer and containing threats to harm them. For their part, the police said they had not been able to find one single missive to investigate. A girl was attacked on her way home from a dance at the Goodwood Institute on the night of the 6th of June. She had caught a tram to South Terrace and was walking near the newly built Pulteney School when a man struck her on the head with some implement. Her screams brought people out of their homes, which scared the attacker away. She was taken to hospital as a result of the onslaught. While the attack was adjacent to the area where horses had been hurt, there was no compelling reason to link the crimes, although it was said that police had later received a letter from the assailant, who identified himself as the Horse Maimer, and said he was switching from horses to women. Then 16-year-old Jessie Hall of Birkenhead received such a letter in July 1921. Her workmate, Rosalie Grandison, handed her the letter as she arrived for work at a shop opposite Port Adelaide Town Hall, telling her that it arrived in the post for her. The letter was 2 pages. On the top of the first was drawn a dagger and the word death. Then it went into a threat to kill Jessie and then another girl who lived near her. It was signed from the Horse Maimer. Police investigation revealed that the letter was not from the horse killer, but instead had been written by 17-year-old Rosalie Grandison, her friend who had handed her the letter. When Rosalie appeared in court in July, she claimed it was just a joke that had gotten out of hand. The girls had remained friends, and the magistrate wanted to dismiss the case then and there, but the police prosecutor said he was under orders to proceed with the case. The case was adjourned, and 1 week later, when it came up again, the prosecutor immediately withdrew the charge. The registered newspaper in December 1921 had a small article about a rumour spread that the horse slayer had been arrested at a River Murray town and was in custody at the Parkside Mental Hospital. It appears to have been wishful thinking. In February 1922, with the slayings apparently ended, A land and estate agent named Wilfred John James Collins applied to the government for payment of the reward in the case, which amounted to about £500. The Chief Secretary replied that nobody had been arrested or convicted of the crimes, and therefore the reward could not be paid. In 1918, Collins had been managing a shop in the Central Market when his suspicions were aroused by a regular customer. A young woman who also worked in the shop was so perturbed by the man that she left her job. Collins said the man's demeanour was odd, and his employment brought him into contact with sharp instruments. One night, coming into the city from Unley, he observed the man loitering about, which consolidated his belief. Collins contacted the police, the deputy town clerk, and the SPCA, who he regularly reported to, concerning his suspect. Collins alerted police that he had seen his suspect by moonlight in the East Park lands, near Grenfell Street in October 1919. Nothing came of this, and the only horse-killing event that occurred that month took place miles away in Brooklyn Park. In February 1920, Collins was again trying to stir up interest in his suspect. He spoke to Miss Wells at the SPCA, who wrote to the police on his behalf. That night, Detective Damon met Collins in Market Street, and the suspect was pointed out to him. Damon had never seen the man before that evening. Collins' persistence can only be imagined. He reported that the suspect spoke to him in King William Street on the evening of the 2nd of November 1920, when he told Collins, "I'll have you one of these nights." Collins had interviewed a man who lived with his suspect in 1918 and 1919, and according to him, the man often went out around 6 p.m. and came home at 8 a.m., sometimes sleeping in the parklands, and often bringing bikes, tools and fowls home with him, presumably stolen. He said he would not trust him with horses, as he was supposedly very cruel to animals. On the 16th of January 1921, a constable saw a man who matched the suspect's description, carrying a stick in the South Parklands and acting strangely. When the man saw the policeman, he made his way off in the opposite direction. Whether it was the same man or not, Collins continued to stalk the man, even though allegedly the suspect threatened to disembowel Collins if he didn't stop following him. Possibly because of Collins' nuisance extending over 3 years, the man left Adelaide to live in the country. According to Collins, this unnamed man was later arrested, found to be insane and sent to Parkside Asylum in September 1921. He was released in November 1921, but readmitted in February 1922. The suspect, who suffered occasional periods of depression, was still at Parkside in 1924 and reportedly caused no trouble. Then the 39th victim was discovered laying dead in a blood-splattered paddock behind the West Terrace Cemetery by a labourer on his way to work on the morning of the 8th of April 1922. A black horse valued at £20, belonging to an undertaker, had a long gash across its throat. On the morning of the 8th of July 1922, police in North Adelaide were advised that another bay pony had had its throat slashed in a park near Kingston Terrace. A butcher named Powell, who lived nearby, came forward to claim the animal. The attack was presumed to have happened the previous night, as the horse's corpse was stiff when found at 8 a.m. Although imitators could have killed some of the animals, those who examined the victims said that there were similar characteristics involved in many of the crimes. Collins, in pressing his claims for the reward in 1924, which he was adamant he was entitled to, having followed his suspect day and night for 3 years, explained away the killings that took place after the man he pestered was placed in the asylum, by saying the man must have escaped on those nights and committed the bloody deeds. The government denied that ever happened. The cruel series of crimes ceased in the winter of 1922, this time for good. Possibly the perpetrator left Adelaide. A 14-year-old mare in foal had her throat cut in a paddock 200 metres from the railway at Gladstone, a small town 221 kilometres north of Adelaide, on the 14th of April 1923. But other than that the horse was killed in the dark of night in such a manner, nothing else connected the cases. Horses were also being attacked in Melbourne. A 40-year-old man named James Heffey was jailed for killing 4 horses in Caulfield in 1923. Somebody was also killing horses from at least 1921 to 1930 by causing internal injuries. and racehorses were being shot by gangsters involved in the gambling racket. Meanwhile, in Katanning, Perth, a number of horses were stabbed. On the 12th of September 1924, a 14-year-old boy was stabbed by 24-year-old Frederick Sparling as they walked down the road. When questioned, Sparling said he had once been kicked by a horse, and since had stabbed or maimed a horse at every opportunity. He had had an impulse, he said, he could not resist to stab his friend. Sparling was sentenced to a year each for 3 counts of horse maiming and 3 years for stabbing the teenager. Somebody was slashing people's coats at the Wayville Trots in 1950, and the police superintendent tasked with catching the person had worked on the horse slayer case. An article in a newspaper about the matter incorrectly said the case was solved by the arrest of a man of weak intellect, obviously a reference to Francis Marker. The identity of the Parklands fiend was never determined, nor their motivation for their actions, and why the attacks came to an end is equally unknown. The horse slayer killed at least 23 horses and maimed a further 16 and 1 heifer in his 4-year reign of terror, before he slipped away forever into the dark corners of history.